on mute. Okay, that got a lot quieter, didn't it? We've got 18 on, so by the time you get phone noise, from a lot of people, it just really adds up. So I wish it could be something where we could, talk back and forth more, but sometimes it wouldn't be, let us get through everything, that there is to cover. So, wow, welcome to everybody for this. This is our February 1st. This is the full moon in Leo at 13 degrees and a sun in Aquarius creating that moon. The one thing I was going to go through was to really kind of review the moon cycles that we're in, because it really represents the big shift that we're doing with the emotional body. And we're going through a recalibration that, I feel kind of like redundant when I say these things. I always say, well, we've never done this before. Well, yeah, we have, but in a way we still haven't, because of, the precession of the equinoxes and all of the different, things that come up and the placements of things, and they're very unique. One thing that some of you, they've been in the last 2 or 3 calls, know, I've been going into the comparison of astrological interpretation with regards to the tropical zodiac, which is Western philosophies and understanding, as opposed to the sidereal, which is more Eastern philosophy. And there's about, if you just do a 30-degree difference, it's about 27 degrees off as far as where they lay in the signs, and the sidereal is about 27 degrees behind, the Western. So when you look at those interpretations, it means that everything you hear from Western astrologers when they talk about these things, if something's going to Aries, it's actually just going into Pisces in the East. And I haven't really been able to reconcile why they created that, unless it was partially to create different timelines of interpretation with regards to East and West cultures. And even in the Vedic astrology, they have whole different house systems. They have different ways that they interpret the energies. Although when you listen to the way that they articulate, what they're saying is similar, but the way the energy plays out is, of course, different, because anything going through Pisces, it's at the end of the zodiac. It is, really deeply working with religion, spirituality, transcendental, type of work and things like that. Whereas Aries is pure new beginnings and everything else. So it's almost like, Western astrology is going into Aries, and then Eastern astrology is just now getting into Pisces. And that really, puts people in completely, it puts us in the West at the beginning of the zodiac, and it still has the East coming up at the end. And what's really, the more I've gone into, I think I may have mentioned this last week, but if you look at, let's say, Pluto in Capricorn, which went in January of 2008, and it just got out, the previous, couple years getting into Aquarius. Pluto in Capricorn is always about structures. It's ripping things apart. It's ripping apart time. It represents so many things. Saturn represents the physicality of everything that's here in the world. But if you go into Western astrology, Eastern, everything is really just now entering Capricorn, as far as Pluto, in that zodiac, which would mean that technically, if you look, and that's where the sun is represented when we look out from the Earth out into the zodiac. That would mean that, from their interpretation, we're just now beginning to go through the destruction and restructuring, the disintegration of structures, and that would be for another, 16, 18 years, whatever, that it takes, Pluto to get through Capricorn in the sidereal zodiac. when we look at the external world and what's happening right now, just through the news, so it's everybody reporting what's going on in their reality, in their own countries, through their own perception of reality, however you want to look at it. We really are witnessing, I think, a huge disintegration of structures, just like we did starting in 2008. The Western interpretation was accurate, and yet it also feels like the Eastern interpretation would also be accurate. In truth, when you go into just core awareness, just pure essence, we're constantly going in through cycles of destruction and disintegration, but also rebirthing. And Judith talked about this a lot. I mean, for those of you that, I think most everybody on this call had worked with Judith at one point or another. Everything is always a death and rebirth process, always, every nanosecond. But when we're looking at bigger cycles, that really kind of represents, I think, an easier way to discuss these types of things. And also, I may have mentioned this in the last call, but it's really pertinent for now. When you look at big cycles, and they're all talking about the end of the Kali Yuga age, and that's where we're at. Well, you're talking about 26,000 year time cycles, and so if you look at time, time keeps us in the separation, but really time doesn't exist. So everything is just a now moment. So within the immediacy of this moment, if you can sit and observe the disintegration, and you observe the vastness of the ways that disintegration is playing out, it's very humbling because it's disintegration on every single level of perception that you can perceive, and it goes beyond that. It really goes beyond human capacity to articulate in truth, because it's always happening on the atomic and subatomic levels, but it's also happening within the field, the morphogenetic field that I've talked about so many times before, Rupert Sheldrake. And I've also said that we're not separate from the field. As we continually go in through that disintegration, so does all other 8 billion people that are here in physicality. Assuming it's that. I've told y'all before, I don't think there's 8 billion physical people here. I think a lot of those numbers are inflated, but I could be totally wrong. For those of you that have gone to India and China, and you've experienced the density within the cities, there's a lot of people within those cities. It's kind of like New York on steroids. And I don't know if y'all seen some of the pictures on Facebook that they share, like these apartment tenements. These huge, just multi-story buildings, like 40, 50 stories, I guess, and they're huge, just block apartment buildings where everyone's crammed in together like little sardines. In some of the Asian cultures, I couldn't stand that level of densification. It would drive me nuts. And yet for them, they're born into it, so I guess they acclimate to it. But us in the States, we're so used to being sprawled out and having space. I couldn't handle that. It's just a different type of awareness and experience, of course. But so if you look at the way, though, that the disintegration is happening, not just in this country, but in all the other countries. And I know it's hard to find either news sources that will share that with you. You have to really go look. If you're curious, to see what's happening in the other countries. Now, sometimes PBS will be good about going to other places on the globe and sharing some things. National Geographic takes you different places, but the point is, one of the biggest parts of what's happening is the disintegration of the polarity, the very thing that keeps us deeply in a divisive level of physicality, and yet we also exist because of the polarity. We exist, of course, because of gravitation to the planet. Of course, that's just the physical, but there's something about the very fundamental part of the energy, the adamanton particles that make us up. And depending on the esoteric people that you've read, and people that they call pseudoscience, whatever. I mean, whether it's Greg Braden, Bruce Lipton, Lynn McTaggart, Patricia Corey, I mean, all these different ones have talked about quantum physics. They've talked about what makes us up as just presence, as an energy event, and everything just is energy, and everything is frequency. And I've talked about so many times with this, as we go in and shift our frequency, we're able to leave more densification. We're able to feel either less stressed. We feel like we don't have the weight on us that we did before. And again, all of that really, it's not real. It's a projection. But it's also genetic and ancestral inheritance. We come in here, and I know this is going to be, I've already discussed these things so many times, but right now it's a very potent time to put this all in perspective. From a standpoint of the fact that we are going through the new beginnings, Neptune went into Aries on January the 26th. I mean, they've been talking about this since 2011 when it entered Pisces. It's leaving the end of the zodiac, which is the zodiac really just represents 12 signs of a cycle of life. It happens individually, but it also happens collectively. So if it's going into Aries, it's creating a whole new dream. That's been 165 years for Neptune. Coming up this next couple weeks, on the 13th, just less than 2 weeks from now, Saturn is going to go into Aries. It's going to follow. Neptune is the dream. Neptune it's so representative of the way we perceive ourselves as an aspect of God. It's how we dream. It's the core spiritual essence of who we are. And then when you look at Saturn is structures. Saturn is coming to meet up with Neptune and give us that structure. So when you look at it just through astrology, the astrology, and that's Western astrology because everything's in our Aries. Saturn's a 2.5 to 3 year time period with that. So it moves along pretty good because it takes 29 years for Saturn to move through the whole zodiac. And so really we're starting a 29-year cycle. And Saturn is one of the big ones because it is structure. And Neptune with that dream, I mean, we're going to be in Aries for quite a while with this. So the dream is not immediate in some senses, and yet I think it depends on where people are. Let's say you have someone that's really been working on themselves for a long time. And you have like these yogis, and they go into deep meditational states and do deep transcendental work, and they really are living the formless. They're not stuck in structure. Many of them don't necessarily have homes that they're grounded in. They really live at the will of spirit, and they go where spirit guides them at any given point of time because they're representing the vast infinite as an expression here in human form. And sometimes just because they are in such deep presence, they can travel and they permeate the field. I can't, it's so, this is not where I imagined going today. As y'all know, I mean, I go wherever spirit takes me with this. So it's like they permeate the field with the capacity of the light that they've taken in. And it very much reminds me, I don't know if, I think I may have talked about these books once before, but there's Baird Spalding was a writer that wrote some books back in the early 1900s, went on these, pilgrimages to different, places, and really was communing with the masters and up in the Himalayas, different places. And it's a box set book of 6 books, and it really goes into this whole dynamic of talking to spirit, talking to the beings that just would walk in and out just as presence. They weren't necessarily here in deep density, and yet they were very available. Between Yeshua, Mary, just Kuan Yin, all the masters were just there. And when you leave this external world of form, to the extent that you're able to start working with people, the masters in that sense, it gives you a new platform and way that you're engaging the world. And I'm not going to get off on those, but for us and where we're at, the cycle that we've been into right now is very much, this is where I started. It's very representative of the moon. So just a very short recap for the beginning of this year. On January the 3rd, we had a full moon in Cancer at 13 degrees. There's something about that 13. The sun is in Capricorn at that point. The next moon was a new moon in Capricorn at 28 degrees. That's the very end of that sign, and it's a mastery degree. We then had a full moon in Leo today, 13 degrees. The sun is in Aquarius, creating that moon in Leo. Leo represents kings. It represents how we present ourselves out proudly to the world. It's a whole big dynamic, and the fact that the sun is in Aquarius, though, is important because of the fact all the personal planets are traveling with the sun right now. So they've all aspected the moon in Leo, and this is the opening moon going into the eclipse series. And so the first eclipse that we're going to have is the solar eclipse new moon. It's in Aquarius at 28 degrees and 50, which is just right before the anaretic degree. That's again, this moon opens up what I call the eclipse window, which is 6 weeks. You have 6 weeks leading up to the first eclipse. 2 weeks. 2 weeks before the first eclipse, the 2 weeks in between the eclipses, and then 2 weeks after the eclipse window. And so it's a 6 week window. The fact that the first one is going to be in Aquarius, it's a new moon, which means a lot of new beginnings, and it's, again, at the end of 28. So it really is mastery because it's not in 29. And yet we may end up getting, when they talk about the anaretic degree, it means that it's usually potent. It means that you can have a lot of deep death and destruction. It means very transformative energies. And it's at the end of Aquarius, which represents people. It represents water. It represents all sorts of things. And that's before it goes into Pisces. So I do think it's going to make things really slippery. It's like, and yet I do think it is going to be very representative of creating the new beginnings, because the eclipses really offer windows into what we're creating, and it's kind of like a moon on steroids. And so I really think that this 2 week period is leading us up to that first eclipse. The next eclipse is the next eclipse is a full moon eclipse, lunar eclipse. It's in Virgo, at 12 and 54, which basically is 13 degrees. So you've got two 13-degree moon cycles that have come in here with full moons that are in opposition points to where the sun is traveling now. But in Virgo, it's representing, the virgin energy. It's representing core creation energy. It's it really is. And again, full moons are usually releasing, so we may have a lot of releasings with that moon. But again, with every death is rebirth, and the sun will be in Pisces at that point, which is representing. Pisces is also like Neptune. It's representing. It represents water. It represents our spiritual essence. It represents deep emotional immersion. Now, after that, we're going to have a new moon in Pisces at 28 degrees. There's that 28 degrees again. It's mastery. It's at the end of a sign, but it's before the 29th degree, which is the anaretic degree, which is usually destructive. I think this 28th degree is going to help people be in mastery, but not necessarily be in detriment. Now, if you want clarification on that, go to a professional astrologer, which I am not. But so that's on March the 18th. That is going to close out the eclipse window. Now, what's interesting about that, because that new moon, again, new moons are creation energy, it's at the end of Pisces, at the end of the zodiac. But just on the other side of that zodiac, right there in Aries, Saturn and Neptune are creating the new structure, the new dream, and everything else, just on the other side of that window. And I've talked about this before with the zodiac. It's almost like you feel like it's almost like you're looking out a window from an old reality into a new reality. And depending on which side of the window you're on, you're either in the past or you're in the future. So because this is in Pisces, it feels like that we're still trying to wrap up anything that may be left over in Pisces before getting into the new reality as far as an emotional expression. Because then the next moon is going to be April the 1st. It's a full moon at 12 degrees Libra. So, and because the moon is at Libra, the sun is in Aries. So the sun is, coming along its path, but, the sun is who we are as core expression, presenting ourselves into the world. The fact it's in Aries, it's just going to have lit up Saturn and Neptune. And Libra is the other, which is, the other sense of self, no matter what the other represents. Then the next moon will be April 17th, which will be a new moon at 27 degrees Aries. And again, that's later degrees of Aries, so it's mastery. That's as far as I'm going to go with these moons. But the point is, I want you to see there's a pattern here that's being represented with the moon cycles. It's going between 13 and 13:28, 13:28 and 12 and 27. It slowly goes backwards as we go through, but it really is setting us up for mastery as in the experiential world. April 17th is a new moon. The next one. So it really completes through Aries, I think, through April 17th, as far as beginning emotional new expression before before the moons go into a Taurus, Scorpio, I think, axis, if I'm trying to remember. I don't remember where they are. I haven't looked. Anyway, but there's a whole cycle taking place right now for the first 4 months of this year, the first third of the year. And depending on where you're at and how you are seeing the world, how you envision the world, if you're deeply immersed in your emotional body, you really have the chance to ground some really new creations through your heart. And if there's any place in your mind where you think your mind is taking over, just let that go. I mean, when we get to the meditation part, really just consider letting anything that is stuck in your mind fall away. If there's some place that's doubt, if it's some place that you're just not sure of, how something's going to work for you, just let it go. Whatever that looks like. And so that's the emotional part of all this. The next part, actually, I forgot to pull up the chart. The next stuff I kind of want to talk about here is the way the energies are working, and then also interacting with a couple of other components, especially if you're looking out into the world of form and you're looking at the United States, you're looking at the energy there, you're looking at the energy in the other countries, you're looking at the war, you're looking at any of that warring energy. This is really a perfect explanation of how these things work. And what's funny, and this is observing it through the tropical zodiac, which is not necessarily where the sun is, but it's still very right on point the way the energy works out. And I'm not sure how the sun can represent in sidereal in one perception of interpretation, but then in tropical we get another. And how do they blend and how do they work? How can both be accurate? I would actually say that both are true. I also am feeling, though, that the tropical zodiac, because it's the story that tends to be looked at through Western culture, I think it's almost like it's created through observing the world through distortion. And in truth, if you look at the distortion that's playing out, especially in Western cultures, the Western cultures are very much deeply immersed in control, greed, manipulation. And what's happening is, I think we're going through, even though Pluto's gone through Capricorn, Pluto's in Aquarius right now, but in sidereal, Pluto is just now at the beginning of Capricorn. And I think we're going to see much more disintegration than we ever saw before. So if you've got Western astrologers that are not looking at the at the sidereal zodiac, I think that they're missing part of the picture. And again, this is all interpretation, and we humans are so busy projecting value onto our experiences, to our awarenesses, all these types of things. But I really think it's just something that's worth noting. And again, just observe it. Don't attach to it, because we don't want to attach to anything. But what was really interesting about the fact that we went through all of the end of December, and all the personal planets, to remind you, went through the galactic center. That's the center of the Milky Way. That's the center of our existence through our solar system. And the fact that they're all still traveling together, the personal planets, means that they're still working in conjunction to bring us a new reality, where are we going. And between the last moon, when we had on January the 18th, until now, they all came in contact with Pluto. So we have been in a crucible these last 2 weeks of deep transformation through Vesta, which is hearth and home, Venus, which represents what we value, what we love. It's all heart-based stuff. On top of that, we had Mercury with the Sun, with Pluto. That's huge transformational energy. Right after that, we had Mars go across it, as well as Astraea. Astraea is more of healing energies and things like that. That's a lot of energy to happen in 2 weeks, all on Pluto. And as I mentioned before, the opposition point to this this interstellar object, whether it's a comet or not, 3i Atlas, all of that is in pure opposition to this all these Pluto conjunctions. That is hugely transformative energy. We've never had that before. 3i Atlas has never been here before. This is the third of the interstellar objects that have been coming in. The first one was Oumuamua back in 2017, I think, maybe. Borisov, I think, came in a couple of years after that. But those just pierced through the ecliptic of the plane. 3i Atlas is traveling within the ecliptic plane as all the other planets. If you didn't know any different, you would think it would be a planet. And it's going backwards in retrograde motion as far as planetary observation would be observed. So I think it's taking us on a deep remembering journey, because anytime you're retrograding, you are going back and redoing, resurfacing, rehashing, re-imaging. It's all the re-words. And the fact that it's in opposition to Atlas, that is the most powerful energy that there is, outside of the fact that it was in conjunction. I mean, if Atlas was on that path, that would be a big deal. But because it's in opposition, it's created the polarity, the pure opposite polarity of being in the same path. And that's a lot of energy. Also, in attendance with that is Waldemuth Lilith. Waldemuth really represents, I think, some of darker sexual expression, and the fact that that's gone across Pluto. You know, it was there actually at the last moon. I think that's a big deal. The other things that's happened since then, Pallas Athena went from Aquarius into Pisces on the 24th. Pallas Athena is more justice. The fact that it's going to be traveling in Pisces for the next, couple weeks. Let me see. Pallas is going to go through all the way through. Pallas goes all the way through the 24th or 5th of April. So we basically have over 3 months almost of justice going through Pisces. So can you imagine justice coming forth with regards to everything that's being represented with the spiritual world? I have a feeling that would represent karmic justice coming forth. The other thing that's going to be interesting with this dynamic as well is the fact that Pallas Athena is going to come across the North Node. The North Node represents where we're going individually and collectively. That happens on the 21st, which is just a few days into the eclipse. So matter of fact, may as well just start into this eclipse energy. One of the biggest things that's also happening, it did happen before. Nessus is one of the centaurs that's based on abuse. And the fact that Saturn and Neptune danced with that for the last 2 years really, I think, was breaking apart the structures that allowed abuse to stay in place. Nessus is still in Pisces, according to the Western zodiac. It's in Aquarius, according to the sidereal zodiac. It will not enter Pisces, probably, God, for another couple of years, because it moves slow. But Nessus represents abuses, and it's around 19 of Pisces as far as Western. But what is going to happen, though, as we approach the eclipse window, Mercury is going to come across Nessus. Mercury retrogrades in the middle of the eclipse window. That's going to be extremely, extremely telling, because Mercury represents communication of all sorts. I think it also represents, and Mercury's in Pisces, it's going to represent communication with regards to religion, spirituality, our pure essence, our God essence. I don't think it's a mistake that it's there. So here's Mercury coming up to basically 22 degrees of Pisces, which is, it's approaching the end of the zodiac, but it's not. It's not part of the new beginning in Aries until much later. Well, not much later, but a couple months later, because it's going to hit the retrograde in the eclipse window. As it does it right past Nessus. I think the next, at least the whole month, is really going to ignite a review of abuse, all sorts of abuse of power, abuse of sex, abuse of our human expression as a child of God, whatever that looks like for you. I think it really is going to be a huge deal. We've got all this Epstein stuff coming out. I expect all sorts of huge energies to blow up during the eclipse window because Nessus runs along at about 19, 20 degrees. Mercury retrogrades slowing up at about 20 degrees, 19, 20 degrees, but it slows down even further, and it sits on 22 degrees, which is within 3 degrees of Nessus, literally for basically 2 weeks during the whole eclipse window. That's not a mistake. Mercury meets Nessus of abuse on the second eclipse on March 3rd. Venus will have just crossed it, and the trine to the 3-eye atlas is right in there with the energy. Trines are positive and flowing energy, though. So I think it's going to take us forward in a positive, collective consciousness, cosmic sense. But there's going to be, it's almost going to be like anything that's abuse doesn't have any choice but to come out. Retrogrades are notorious for bringing out the truth. The other part to that is that Pluto is at 4 degrees of Aquarius. It basically is at a semi-square to Nessus and Mercury. Pluto is transformative. Semi-squares are difficult energies. I think anyone that's got this stuff hitting in their charts, anyone that's been in abuse, just watch the news. I think it's going to blow up during this eclipse window. But it is part of our future because of the fact that Neptune and Saturn will have just been into Aries. They're going to be at 0 degrees, creating all these new beginnings. So while we're having the new beginnings, we're still going to have complete disintegration like we've never seen before with regards to communication and abuse at the end of Pisces before those things get into Aries. And we don't really have a choice. And the fact that Saturn and Neptune are conjunct at 044 of Aries, that happens on the 20th, just 3 days into the eclipse window, that's a huge deal. And Pallas Athena is going across. It's going to meet up with the North Node while all this is going on. Justice is coming forth with all that. The other thing that's going to be interesting about that second eclipse on March the 3rd, it's a full moon lunar eclipse, and it's at 12:54 Virgo, basically 13 degrees. The sun is what creates that full moon lunar eclipse. That sun is at basically 12, 13 degrees of Pisces. Pallas Athena is sitting on that sun on the full moon lunar eclipse. So if you can imagine justice coming in with the sun, lighting up whatever it is, and then you've got Mercury sitting on abusive Nessus within Pisces. Pisces is all this dark hidden. It's kind of like Scorpio, but it represents more, I think, the spiritual aspects of who we are as a collective consciousness. And this is not a coincidence. The North Node is where we are. They've all been aspecting the North Node. And at the same time, Mars enters Pisces on that second time as well. I mean, you can't make this stuff up energetically. So you've got Venus, the Sun, Mars, Vesta, Pallas Athena, all in Pisces. And as the eclipse, as we go past post-eclipse, Mercury's retrograding back over Venus, back over the Sun, back over Mars, all the personal planets over Pallas Athena, over Nessus. This is all communication before all of them go into Aries later on through from March forward. Let me see. Well, actually, Venus goes through March the 6th. The Sun goes through on the 20th with the spring equinox. Mars doesn't get there until the 9th. Mercury goes through on the 14th of April, and then Pallas Athena on the 26th of April. So really, we don't get all of the personal planet energy supporting the new beginnings in Aries until we get all the way through the end of April, really. And so it's a very, it's straightforward energy, but it's a lot of, because all the personal planets are together, it's very supportive energy. And they all cross Saturn and Neptune at their own times between March and April. So huge transformative. You know, it's hitting Neptune with the dream, it's hitting Saturn with structure. And they've already gone through their transformative parts with Pluto. The other part to this is that Pluto, basically going on into March and April, is going to be at 4 and 5 degrees of Aquarius. That is sextiling right in the middle of the Neptune-Saturn transits in Aries. Sextiles are workable energy. They're not as flowing as the trines, but it's flowing energy that helps us, you know, create the new stuff. Now, Juno of partnerships is going to meet up with Pluto on April the 17th. That's going to be at the same time we've got that new moon at the 27 degrees of Aries. And it basically will be sextiling Neptune. Pluto or Saturn will move a bit further, but it's really going to help bring partnership, transformational energy into the new dream. Because, again, sextiles really help us with that. So, and I know this may feel confusing because of if you don't understand a lot of the astrology. The main thing is to know that all of this energy is working pretty good together. Now, that's at the end of the zodiac. That's just one part of this equation that I want to talk about. The next part is to discuss the other aspect of abuses of power because of what you do see in the world, what you see in this country, and this isn't just presidential. It's business abuse, it's sexual abuse, it's all the above. So to go into that, I want to revisit oscillating Lilith. And if you've been on the call the last couple times, I've talked about oscillating Lilith here and there, but it really, to me, represents the divine feminine being activated in each of us. And it oscillates because it's the farthest point of the moon from the Earth's in the Earth's trajectory. In orbit. And the apogee is the furthest point. The perigee is the closest point, which is represented by Priapus, which is it's more masculine energy in its highest expression. But what's interesting about this, it's going back and forth in Sagittarius, and it's been activating with the galactic center. And it started that at the end of December when we had all the personal planets going in. It's going to continue going back and forth over the galactic center, coming up to the galactic center. It approaches the galactic center in the middle of the eclipse window. And so I don't think that's a mistake. It's also going to be going across the Great Attractor, which is another galactic point out there that brings in more cosmic awareness. But another dynamic that's working within that are two other centaurs, one that's called Narcissus. It represents exactly what you hear, narcissists. And also Ceto Forces. Ceto Forces is a binary star system, but when I've read about this, but I think I may have mentioned this one once before, but those two centaurs are coming right up on top of each other in the eclipse window, and they go retrograde on the second eclipse. And so, as you can imagine, Narcissus is going to represent everything regarding narcissism, and it's a very complex dynamic. If you've been on the previous couple calls, Narcissus was going through Scorpio all the way through the 20th of January. So this is only just a week and a half ago. Narcissus entered into Sagittarius, and where Ceto Forces already has been. Now, I bring that one up because the dynamic of those two things together. So imagine Narcissus is representing any person's capacity to not see beyond themselves. Completely, all the things that goes with narcissism. And again, I don't have to name anybody for you. Just look out in the world and you can pick several narcissists playing it out. And again, it doesn't have to be the polarized ones, but almost any political figure, and I mean, depending on where these things play in their chart, of course, I think you're going to see them really go out the box. Now, the fact it's moved out of Scorpio into Sagittarius will help make it not be so bad. But up through January the 20th, I mean, 29 degrees, it was really rough on that last moon. But the fact that they're traveling together, and I want to give you a little bit here on Ceto Forces, because this really represents the collective. So this is coming from a book written by Benjamin Adama. He writes about all these other asteroids. This is in the Centaurs and Damocloids Scattered Disk Objects book. But basically, this is what he says about Ceto. He says the conversion of what dwells in the collective conscious and the unconscious into mostly visual expressed zeitgeist report, one image saying more than 1,000 words, perceiving auto-destructive elements in huge unconscious processes, developments behind the scenes, so all the hidden parts, immense out-of-control movements within the social, ecological, or geopolitical dimension. I'm going to read that again. Developments behind the scenes and immense out-of-control movements within the social, ecological, and geopolitical dimension. That's covering political, it's covering ecological, it's covering social stuff. These are immense out-of-control stuff, developments behind the scenes. What's going on in Minneapolis? What's going on in our presidencies? What's going on in any of the war areas? I mean, this is huge blowing up. And all this is the beginning of Sagittarius. Sagittarius really is kind of, I think, people-oriented in a lot of ways. But so, and it goes on to say, we press photographers who show the excesses of socioeconomic blind spots. We're getting that in the news all the time. The art of bringing the more dimensional context and connotation of a situation or process in synergy with the eye-catcher element, and this one's really good, non-personal Gestalt therapy. I can hear Jude talk about when they started the Gestalt Institute in New Orleans. She and her husband at the time, George, and her brother Ed and Pam, and they talked about the Gestalt work that they were doing. And so imagine that what we're doing really is Gestalt work. That's why this Ceto asteroid really is, I think, a big deal. It really represents. Now, what's interesting about this centaur is named after Keto, which is a sea monster in Greek. Keto was the daughter of the earth goddess Gaia and the sea god Pontus. Phorcys was Keto's brother and husband, with whom she had many children. So it's a wife, husband type thing, but it was also her husband brother. So the fact that you've got that imagery going on with Narcissus, I think it really is going to go deeply into all the pedophilia stuff. It's going to go into the distortion of the way that these things have been played out in the outer world of form in that distortion. But I'm not going to go through this whole little bit. I mean, it's a couple pages, but you get the idea just from the summary above. I mean, this really is taking us into the very core of how we perceive ourselves through social, socioeconomic, and just all sorts of expressions with regards to that type of energy. And the fact that Narcissus is running up against it really speaks to the dark. Those asteroids, Narcissus and Ceto, are coming together. I mean, they're right on top of each other in the eclipse window at the beginning of Sagittarius. Now, in Sagittarius, there at the beginning, that is trining Aries. So it's trining Neptune, it's trining Saturn. So those are going to be positively working energies that are working with Neptune and Aries within the eclipse window. And at the same time, while you have the new coming forth, you get the new because of the death. And there's it's almost like, I think the positive part of the energy is that it's breaking apart the distortion of the narcissistic and that the distortion of the Ceto things that I just mentioned. So I think it's a highly transformative energy. Now that's when you look at it in the tropical zodiac. When I look at the sidereal zodiac, which is where the sun lights up, these two centaurs are at the beginning of Scorpio. Scorpio is it that represents the dark sexual. It represents the dark, its secrets. It's the dark underbelly of humanity. You've got this narcissistic and Ceto energy playing out at the beginning of Scorpio in Eastern interpretation of the sidereal astrology. And you've got the Ophiuchus star system, which is overlaid there. Ophiuchus is the serpent bearer. The imagery of this and the implications, I think, are quite vast. And they're not going to be discussed the same way, interpretation-wise, in the West as they would, I think, from what I'm seeing in the other. And the fact that they're where they are, oscillating Lilith is going back and forth over these two energies all the way through. Let me see. The last time it goes back and forth over them is going to be. It does it all the way through May, before the Lilith energy moves forward, and Narcissus goes back into Scorpio on the 17th of April, which is that new moon in Aries at 27 degrees. I told you these moon cycles, they're affecting all sorts of things on the charts. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Narcissus retrogrades back into Pisces or Scorpio at 29 degrees, while with the oscillating Lilith energy, which my interpretation is that it's the highest divine expression of the divine feminine. And so the divine feminine is taking that energy in Scorpio and finalizing the dark expression of it all the way, through middle of spring and then all the way down into summer. And Narcissus is going to go all the way back, and it's approaching the 22-degree Scorpio full moon that we had May 12th of last year. And I told you all that point last year. It's huge. 22 is a master number. The fact that Narcissus is going to go direct, right, basically almost at that degree, I don't think that's a mistake. It does it right before the fall eclipses. So the rest of this year is going to be working with narcissistic expression, but through the darkest types of expression, I believe. Narcissus does not leave Scorpio until November the 12th. And it doesn't do it until after the eclipse window in the fall. So lots and lots of narcissism is going to play out in not very nice ways this year. That's why I think 2026 is going to be a year of deep disintegration with regards to political people, structures, things like that. And I mean, we'll see how it all works out. But the oscillating Lilith is going to go back and forth, and I'm going to have to send some graphics sometime so y'all can see the way this is playing out. But it sloshes through a whole sign, forward for a couple of weeks, backward for a couple of weeks, or like a week and a half, back and forth. It is totally erratic in its pattern, and it's a really bizarre energy to observe. But so that's another huge dynamic that's playing out during this eclipse window. And the square to this new moon solar eclipse in Aquarius on the first eclipse is at the 28th degree of Scorpio. And that's where oscillating Lilith is sitting, at that square. Squares are challenging energies. And the fact that it's just on the other side of Narcissus, I really think you're going to see a squaring of that narcissistic energy with the first eclipse. I really think there's going to be a lot of geopolitical movement at that time. And we'll just have to see how it plays out. So, let me see, what else was there that I observed? I never know where I'm going to go with any of this stuff. It's so funny. Now, the South Node is in Virgo, so it says that's at the beginning of Pisces. Okay, so I mean, during this eclipse, you've got all the personal planets going across the North Node. So that's conjuncting energy. It's working with the North Node more exactly with where we're going, and I think that's going to be more positive energy with it. The nodes are in opposition. So every time these personal planets are working with us to go toward our future, they are in opposition to the South Node of our emotional expression of where we've been. So we're going to be working with our future and our past all at the same time with all this personal energy. What it basically means is that this is going to be a very personally transformative eclipse window, because all the personal planets are there. It's just on the other side of Saturn and Neptune that's going into Aries. So I know that's a lot to take in. I'm sorry that it's bombarded you with a really, heavy thing. But, and again, I mean, all these personal planets will go into Aries, next month in March. Venus on the 6th, the Sun on the 20th. But I mean, Mercury doesn't go direct until, like, I want to say it's like the 19th of March, and it happens right on top of the North Node, and it's going to be stationed on the North Node. Mercury is going to be communicating with our future literally for almost 2 weeks after it meets up with Mars. I've never seen these kind of configurations happen before. I've looked at astrology for 20 years. And what's funny, the Linden asteroid is right in front of the Pamela asteroid, coming up right behind Mercury. So if you don't think that Judith is traveling along with us, it really is true. I mean, and what's funny, right behind Pamela then is the Johnny asteroid, the Jonathan Murray asteroid. The Jonathan Murray asteroid it crosses the Johnny asteroid. So I guess my childhood self crosses my, the Jonathan, and then the town I live in, Murray, I cross after the eclipse window. It's so funny. And all those asteroids just cross Pluto too. But so depending on where your asteroids fall in the sky, everyone's being aspected by something. So for some people, it's going to be highly transformative. For some people, it's going to be just another day. some people won't even really feel this. I don't think on a deep level. If people have immediate aspects to it, I think they're going to be just blown away by it. And again, it's going to play out in very unique ways and sets of circumstances in how people process the energy and how they feel, with it. So, let me see. I think that was the bulk of the astrological understandings that I wanted to bring forth. Well, also Chiron. Chiron is at the end of Aries, and it's with Eris, and they're going to be sitting on top of each other by the time we come to the spring equinox. So the spring equinox, I think, is going to be a really powerful time because the spring equinox is sitting next to Neptune, and Saturn is only a couple degrees away from it. So the spring equinox really, from a sun standpoint, is going to be, again, just another set of energy that's going to take us into opening up the new beginnings. It's almost like there's an unfoldment throughout this whole first half of this year, really, because let me see, Mars doesn't leave Aries until May the 15th, and it's going to cross Eris and Chiron. So, but again, so will all these other personal planets. Venus is going to meet up with Eris and Chiron on the 25th of March. The Lilith asteroid goes across, so then the Sun goes across it on the 17th of April, just right before my birthday. And then Mercury goes across on May the 1st, and then again, Mars, is going across it like around the 12th and 16th. So between now and I think May, all the personal planets will have made it past all of these new Aries beginnings. And there's always, additional conjunctions and energies that play out, but this is the bulk of the energies from a zodiac standpoint and how they work. Now, I say that with a caveat. If I look at the sidereal zodiac, the beginning of Aries doesn't happen until like 27, 26 degrees of the sidereal Aries. So all those new beginnings with the personal planets really wouldn't even begin until much later in the month. Let's see, Venus is crossing over on the 25th. So when it's meeting up with Chiron, it's doing it at the beginning of Aries. So the beginnings from the Eastern philosophies really wouldn't be meeting into Aries until at the end of March. So, and again, I mean, I don't want to get stuck on, well, which one do you listen to? Do you listen to the Western zodiac or do you listen to the sidereal zodiac? I think it's both. And at the same time, I also think that people can get to a place where you go so deep in your own spiritual mastery that you're not bound by what's happening in the sky. I think that we can be so deeply immersed in our own hearts and souls that we literally feel into what's appropriate for any given point of time. And to that particular point, when you look at the external world and you see what's happening, just take yourself. Don't compare yourself and your experience to anybody else out there. Look to see what's happening in your own reality. If you do watch the news on a very regular basis, and you, I mean, it's one thing to keep up with what's going on out there, or at least the version of reality that they're feeding you, the narrative that they want you to feel into, the fear quotient. If you react every time that you have a Donald Trump do something, or a Netanyahu, or a Putin, or every time that there's a protest that blows up, or every time someone gets killed, or it's like you have to go into yourself first and foremost. And this I think it's the way the dynamic is working, and it's on purpose by this way. We really are stepping into a mastery. It's almost like a thesis. Imagine you had a spiritual thesis time period, and God was giving you a test and asking you, how will you respond? Are you going to be in reaction to everything else out in the external world? It doesn't mean that your heart does not empathize with people that are trampled on. It doesn't mean that you would condone any actions being taken by this side or that side. Give up the sides. God has no sides. God doesn't take sides. God is not Republican or Democrat. God is not the Conservative Party or a Liberal Party. It's not the Tories or the whatever it is in England. God doesn't take sides. It doesn't work that way. The hardest part to know is that every soul that is operating right now, and this is always true, everything that's meant to happen was supposed to happen. The soul already had a pre-agreement to do whatever was happening. When you look at the bigger picture of the dynamic of what's going on, whether it's any of the people that have been killed in any of these riots, and that's anywhere around the world, not just Minnesota. Those souls came here and agreed to do this. What they're doing is representing a polarizing point. You're either going to polarize for it or against it. If you're stuck in the mental, you're going to attempt to project a value onto what's happening. My suggestion is you don't want to place a value. And that's not to say that the lives don't have value. Please don't get me wrong here. But it's like you can only change what you can change. If you're so heartfully just disgusted in what's happened with something, go into your heart. If your heart draws you to go do something, then you will go do that. The biggest thing that I would bring up for consideration is learn to not necessarily do, but be. Be presence. Be light. Be an energy of softness. It doesn't have to be soft as you're getting walked over, because you can walk softly and carry a big stick, but you never have to wield the stick. You can be presence. It's kind of like when we've got these wonderful monks walking across the United States. They're walking in presence. Some people, depending on their own spiritual awareness, will look at them and say, "Oh, they're so stupid. Oh, it's cold. Why would they do such a thing?" That's a reflection of where that individual's consciousness is. They're not in bigger picture reality. They don't see a bigger picture, and they don't understand that those monks may have sat in deep transcendental meditation for their entire lifetimes. They were grown up on monasteries or deep, portal points on the planet, and they really carry a vast amount of light. And just their pure presence walking across a country can leave an imprint that that in itself is transcendental. They're changing the morphogenetic field in this particular place, and it's permeating the field. Whether people are conscious of it or not, of course, is a different topic. And yet, at the same time, the field is shifting because of their presence. Now, the same thing can be said for you. Whoever's listening on this call at any given point of time, this is February the 1st, 2026. on this particular day, there's been 17, 18 people listening to this call. Each of these, each person listening to this call is in a very unique frequency field. Depending on where you are, the work you've done, you're emitting a frequency. When we're together, that frequency is amplified, just like the monks walking across this country, or any other organized group of people all around the world that go on and they do telephone meditations. They go in and organize, holding, moments of peace and presence and silence and sending this energy and positive energy. This, it doesn't matter. You don't have to place a value on what it is or what it looks like. The point is you're not caught up in the world. It goes back to that spiritual truth. You can be in the world, but you don't have to be of the world. And so you don't have to be the density. You don't have to be all of that. And you don't have to be brought up into the trauma drama. Is it awful, some of the things? Yes, it's all atrocious. Is it any more atrocious that the people killed in Minneapolis are, is that any worse than the people that are being killed in Gaza? Is it any worse than the people being killed anywhere else on the planet for any other reason? Not really. Your mind will want to sit there and project a value. And again, this is so difficult. The soul comes in here and it's experiencing whatever it has to, whatever it's already agreed to affect not just change for the world necessarily, but they're also balancing out past life karma. I've said this so many times. We each have our genetic and ancestral inheritances. We're always working with that energy while we're here, always. I mean, even when we go back, when we live here in physicality, we are still an accumulation of the energy that's left. Whatever we work to transmute here, hopefully the frequencies have been raised to a point where we don't have to come back in and go through more of the mundane, lower reality creations. Hopefully we've made higher decisions. And it's really not better than or less than. I mean, I hate to use that too. All I can say is that there's such a depth and complexity and unique way that each of our souls go through life expression. That's all I think that anyone can really say. It's a unique experience, and I think to try to funnel anybody into a group of anything really diminishes what the soul journey has been on an individual level. 8 billion supposedly unique souls at any one time. And that's just in physicality. When you go through multidimensional expression, let's say that you are, in this lifetime, you're one of 12 souls operating with the 13th oversoul, and you have developed awareness of all of your parallel realities and your timelines that are operating together, and you've moved into the monad. Let's say that you've moved into that vast part of you that really is the master oversoul, your own avatar, and you are coming from a deep place, merged very deeply with the all that is, merged with spirit, and you're painting in a very wide brush tapestry, and you're affecting the morphogenetic field to that extent, whatever that is. So imagine that we're all on this call. We are all part of this energy. We're all channeling it. We're taking it in. Imagine that presence is coming in. Imagine that, like I've talked about with the meditations, I brought in Mother, Father, God. I bring in all of the masters through infinite presence. I bring in the entire archangelic kingdoms. I bring in all of the elemental kingdoms. I bring in the Elohim, the builders of form. So if you bring in all that energy, and really, I don't even have to bring them in anymore. I never did. They were always here. But I think every time I articulate it, it just reminds each person's soul that hears it that they're there as presence. And so our capacity to work with all those energies on a big scale becomes exponentially larger and larger each time we do that. Because you can't go backwards. When you awaken, you don't go backwards. Now, some people attempt to go back, but you usually end up with a lot more difficulty when you do try to go back. It certainly doesn't feel good to go backwards. I'll put it that way. So the main thing, though, is whether we're observing the world through the astrology or through listening to someone that's articulating something that feels right or whatever, at the very core, make a jump. Make a quantum jump every nanosecond of your life. Leave in the past anything that doesn't serve you. This really is the time to do it. Neptune has already entered Aries. Saturn with structure is going to do it on the 13th, just 12 days from now. So if you're carrying any old energy, and of course this is Western tropical astrology going into Aries, but even if you look at it through the sidereal zodiac and everything's going into Pisces, let's say you're just looking at Neptune and Saturn in the beginning degrees of Pisces. That represents the beginning of a spiritual journey. It represents the beginning of your own transcendental awareness. It represents the oceanic presence. It represents, I could sit here and make a case for you and articulate wonderful energies in either side, put sidereal through Pisces or beginning in Aries. And I think both are true. But as you observe what I think is going to happen, a lot more destruction around the world, there are so many structures that still have to undergo deep transformation. Please don't place the value of, oh, that's awful. If you look at the lens in that way, then you will be contributing to the creation of awful. You're that powerful. So what if you're that powerful? It's not for me to tell you you're that powerful, but what if you are? What if you're that powerful as far as creating something out there? So especially with Pluto going into Aquarius, if Pluto is really just now going into Capricorn, we're literally going to have the next 15 years or whatever it is with destruction of structures with regards to the sidereal zodiac. And I don't know that that's not more accurate. I don't know enough about it to really understand it all, but I do think that that's an important thing to look at. So, yeah. At the end of the day, we come here to go through transcendence on a personal level. And that's going to look very unique for everyone. And depending on where you are, I think as an individual, that's going to, just be your own thing. So, let me see here. Now that I've said all that, I'm gonna do something a little different because it's a potent time at the beginning of eclipses. I am going to unmute, and I'm going to open it up in case y'all have questions. I've never done that. Okay. So if y'all have TVs on or anything, or if you're in a room that's kind of loud, or you'll hear, so if you can move We're going to try this. Works.
It's a no for me this time, but that was very...
Someone's got... I may not be able to do this.
Choice.
Okay, we'll try this. Okay, is everybody there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, yeah, this will be interesting. I've never really had feedback after articulating before going into meditation, but I'm guided to do this, to just try to open it up for any questions. So, so how do y'all feel with all of that? Is there anything that hits you immediately, or anything you want clarification? And you don't have to, but if there's something that you had just sitting in your soul that is bubbling forward, or if you're interested in the new beginnings, how that could work, if you've got some sort of soul place where you feel like you're stuck, if there's something, just anything that needs clarifying before we go into meditation. Everybody's probably just, your minds are probably just overloaded. That was a lot, I know. Sorry. It's like
This
I get it.
Gail,
Yeah.
I appreciate what you said about not awfulizing things that are already hitting you that way. That's what I work on doing all the time, and limiting news and all of that. What you were talking about between now and the 13th about putting things in the past. Can you talk more about that?
Sure. Okay, so let's take the way that you just worded that, and not to rip apart the wording, but it's part of the way that we see ourselves and the way that we articulate about what's happening in our lives. So the way you chose to word that was putting things in the past. So that would say that we are in a place, and I do this too, so I can certainly if we are in a place where we have something in our minds and it keeps coming up, and we say, okay, this is in the now moment. This is a problem. I want to put it in the past. What does it mean for it to be in the past? It means that you reach a place. This can take a lot of work sometimes with people. I mean, Judith, as most of you know, would work with. She's worked with all of us for years. I mean, some of us like a lot of years. But it would take all of her clients. And there was no timetable to this. Like some people, she could say, okay, if this is hurtful to you, let's just go in and release this. And she go in and do a meditation with you, and you may get to a point where it was gone immediately. And some people hold something so deeply. In other words, the trauma, whatever it is, the dynamic is so deeply enmeshed. The webbing. It's like it's entrapped in the soul in such a circuitous way, it's almost impossible to remove it where you can, quote, put it in the past. But in truth, if it's in the past, it's already in the past. We keep referencing something that we perceive to be a wound, or we perceive, someone did us wrong. It doesn't matter what it is. The point is, can you acknowledge that anything that before this particular moment right now, even in this last phone conversation, in the last hour and a half we've been on the phone, everything that's ever happened goes immediately to the past. That's part of our wounding. It's part of the trauma response. And again, depending on the nature of whatever it is that you feel like you're attempting to, quote, put in the past, it's not something that you can pick up and say, oh, I'm going to toss it over here. You can put it in a trash can. Now, you could try that. I mean, visualize, whatever it is, if it's a thought, if it's a feeling, a betrayal, it doesn't matter what it is. Imagine just visualizing and putting it in the trash. As a matter of fact, we can do that in the meditation. because this is a time to really scour our souls. And if something does not serve us anymore, if it is keeping you from pure joy, it's time to go in the trash. It doesn't matter what it is. But you have to understand the dynamics of the way people create. It's the genetic and ancestral inheritance. We all carry it. Some people are just able to transcend, the habituated patterns, the stuff that they carry from the family. Some people can just more easily let that go than other people do. It depends on the way that the trauma bond was created. And part of it is your karma. We each come in with a polarity of a collective energy that we brought in with all of our soul experiences and all the lifetimes. And some of us create really what almost feels like, it's almost like climbing Mount Everest to get to climb out of our gunk. And again, everyone has a unique experience with that. But the very fact that you state, I want to put it in the past, that's a reference. We don't want to reference the past anymore. We just release it. And that's easier said than done sometimes, because the mind takes something and it sits and spins and it plays out all these scenarios. Well, what if I'd done this? What if doesn't exist? That's not what happened. It's one reason why family trauma continues to go on and on and on and perpetuates itself. And sometimes people have to walk completely away from a family scenario because the other person can't heal or transcend whatever got co-created. And, it's why people have to leave parents, kids. It's sad. So whatever it is that you were referencing in your mind when you had that come up, just sit with whatever it is, and we can do this in this meditation. And you just put it on cosmic fire and you let it burn away. And so we'll see how that works, when we go into this. But it really is the case for anything that comes up in our life. And at some point, you will feel so clear that you will no longer reference any of the past hurts. It's like you leave your perception of the story. You give up the story. But that's hard to do because we reference our world based on our story. We reference it based on our past. We reference it based on the history. And who are you without the history? And we've gone to into meditation with these types of things before, and that's hard to do sometimes. Does that help you to gain reference, Gail?
Yes, tremendously. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's hard when we've got something like that, and it's a perfect question. Thank you for bringing it up, because this is the time. We have to be so completely vigilant with our minds and our hearts, with what we let float in and take up our time and our energy. I'm speaking from experience, let me tell you. I'm trying to do my own transcendent work and, take myself out of anything that's kept me, held me back, while at the same time I'm attending an aging parent and two other family members. And part of me feels trapped. I don't want to feel trapped. And you don't want to feel like you're burdened by another person, but at the same time, the energy that you're giving somebody else, are you giving to you? And it's always a balancing game between what do you do for you and what do you do for someone else. And And that's just a natural thing between an aging, assisting with aging family members. Let's say that people are in a manipulative relationship, and you've got a really deep polarity happening with someone, and they're deeply controlling and greedy, manipulative, and you're entrapped in that. How do you walk away from it? You have to own the part that is you co-creating the relationship. And it's a mirror trick. But you have to go into yourself first and go meet the part that you're seeing as a reflection in the other. I mean, that's what all relationship is. It's always a mirror. The key is to meet the other in relationship just to the extent that your soul is asked to with spirit. And you never want to give over your total autonomy or sovereignty to another human. I mean, that's not what we came here to do. We came here to be with, and we came to witness for, and we came to assist, but we didn't come here to be enslaved by anything or anyone else. And that's the name of the game of this physicality we're in, is how do we maintain our own sovereignty? How do we create something in our lives that's it's authentic, and it's not something that creates another polarity, because you don't want to create things that are creating a polarity with anyone else. We're leaving polarity as a construct and as a function. So when we're here just in presence, a lot of people I've talked to are having real problems when they see what's happened with Minneapolis. And I don't want to place a bigger value to the people in Minneapolis, and I don't want to diminish the experience that they're having. And it's not about a comparison, but when you look at all the dynamics in which other people get killed every single day, how are those deaths either better or worse than the other dynamics that are happening all over the planet? What happens is that those certain people die in many different circumstances, and they get martyred. It's always political crap, because they're trying to control a narrative. They're trying to create polarity of hatred within somebody else. And this is one of the biggest things that Spirit's taken me into with this. And I tell people this all the time, because they're in an unhealed place when they observe the outer world. And it amazes me how many people, especially enlightened ones, say, "I hate Donald Trump. I hate." I'm like, ooh, wow. Whose hate is that? Who's there to hate? Is Donald Trump doing some interesting things? He is. Are all the rest of them doing some interesting things? They are. Will things come out with these Epstein files that show that they're really all pretty dark? I mean, it really is. It's a den of iniquity. It's really pretty dark. If you look at the whole structure, the power structure of the political world, it's created by the dark and for the dark. And they all have to make some very nasty circumstantial decisions where they sell their souls to the dark to operate within the environment. And it's a long thing, and I think I've talked about it in some of the other calls before, but a lot of the esoterics talk about it's the loosh, Loosh, and Judith has talked about this several times in retreats and different things. But what happens is, you get people that give up their soul, they give up their sovereignty, and they would rather have the material, the power, the money, this whatever it is that goes with it. And when you sell your soul, the dark takes over a much larger part of your sovereignty, of your soul. And you lose more and more of your soul all the time, because there's an external energy field that takes you over, and before you know it, you're doing things that you would have never dreamed of doing before. It's how the whole Illuminati work. It's how the popular culture system works. It's how Hollywood takes over. It's how, when you had Britney Spears having meltdowns. I mean, any of these people, that you see as celebrities, it's celebrity culture. They sign something that says, you own me. I want the money. I want the house. I want the this. But when they sell their soul, it's vacuous. It's empty. And you can tell them when you look in their eyes. There's nothing there. And it's so sad. And then you'll have other people that really walk away from the money. They walk away from the power, the control, greed, manipulation, and they're just presence. Because when you're creating with spirit, and you really turn your life over to spirit, and you let spirit come in and guide you, it's working with you with your family souls, your whoever, no matter the dynamic. It can be people you work with. As long as you're operating, I think, in a place of high integrity and authenticity, and you're assisting in other soul progressions, then you're also assisting your own soul progression. And that doesn't mean that you can't have money. It doesn't mean that you can't be financially abundant. It doesn't mean you have. Everything's an energy flow. Everything is a frequency. Every single thing out there. The only caveat to that is, let's say that someone gives you a certain amount of money, maybe through inheritance. They may say, I'm going to gift you this. What's the energy behind the gift? If it is something that is just completely heart open, if there's no strings attached, if there's no residual energy field with it, then it can be free and clear. But how many times do people receive something that there's no strings? It's almost never. There's usually always some hidden agenda. There's something, I'll give you this if you do this. And sometimes it's just implied. It's not even articulated in a deep, capacity. But I mean, we came here to be free, completely free. And if you're in reaction to anything out there, I mean, and that doesn't mean to not be heartfully just, torn when you see people dying or killed somewhere else, but you also don't want to be taken into the undertow. This is really a time. This is the other part that Spirit was talking about. I'm just now getting into this, okay? So this energy, because of where we're going into, I think we're going to go into a sequence of events around the world that are going to take us into a spiritual mastery we've never had to go through. It's going to feel like you're in the ground and you're in carbon-based reality, and the densification is going to compress us to a point of pressure. It's going to create pressure to the point where we're either going to feel like we're going to blow up, or you have to allow yourself to be transmuted by the pressure. In other words, you don't go into reaction because you get heavy pressure. It's going to test our spiritual metal beyond anything that we've ever dreamed before. Is what I think it's doing. And you don't want to be in reaction. You want to be in heartful response, but not reaction. If you're in reaction, then you're no different from the external world of what's happening. It's a cause-effect reality. How can you be here and be so grounded, and you walk the earth, you walk into a room, you walk into family, friends, social settings, whatever, it doesn't matter what it is, and you're unwavered by whatever's happening in that space. It doesn't mean that you don't care, and it doesn't mean that you don't, that your heart doesn't get moved to response. Those are two different things. And depending on where you are in the soul evolution, I think is, where you end up being. That was actually one. Thank you for bringing this up, because I had forgotten that point. I was sitting there before the call, and that just popped in. It just went away. So it's supposed to happen. We're talking about this, but it really is taking us into the next level of spiritual mastery. Is what this time is for. The other thing that's interesting with this too, that kind of got another memory that got brought up. James Tiburon used to be one of the guys that used to be a spirit library. He used to channel Metatron. And I remember in the channelings, this is the last 15, 20 years, he used to talk about, because he's dead now, Metatron used to say that we wouldn't really have good, grounded, kind of balanced out peace until 2038. And I was like, God, that's so far away. It's like, shoot. And this is like in 2010. And Jude and I would talk about it. They're like, that's 30 years from now. But when we look at it now, I mean, that's like, 15 years of those are gone. I mean, 2038 is only, actually, 13 years away. And 13 years, it's going to be about the time when Neptune will actually enter Aries in the sidereal zodiac. So it may take us for the next 13 years from that standpoint, if you look at that interpretation, to get to a place more of peace. The other thing that's interesting with this, I've always heard my whole life, through the biblical mythology that was always put forth, they would always say, the end times are going to come. You're going to have the apocalypse. You're going to blah, 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 blah. But in that time, they would always say, you'd have the king of the west, the king of the east. They're going to each take, whatever they can for the planet, divide it up, and it's going to be this big old war at the end. Well, is that what's happening now? I don't know. There was something, I think I sent this in one of the emails at the last call a couple of weeks ago, but it was actually talking about four kings. It talked about the king of the east, west, north, and south. And I think the east was China, north was Russia, which would be Putin, west would be Trump, and then I forget what the south was. Anyway, but it had it as cardinal points rather than just a polarity east and west. And even if you imagined you've got cardinal points, do the north and south actually have to go over to the east and west points? So you end up in a tug of war for the collective human soul. I mean, do you have Russia and China, partnering up against the United States and the Eastern world? It's also interesting that you have two zodiacs. The tropical zodiac is the Western perception of reality, which the mythology is interpreted by Western people in Europe. People in America then, of course, follow that. And then you have the Eastern astrology, which is about 30 degrees off, but it's really more where the real zodiac is. And so the Chinese and maybe Russia too, Japanese. I mean, do the Asian cultures follow that? And if so, if each one's interpreting astrological mythology in a different way, does that affect the way that each group of people on the planet are perceiving each other? Because the dynamics would be fundamentally skewed. It really has brought up a ton of questions for me. And the other part is that, when you look at like the asteroids, there's a whole asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. That's where all the named asteroids are with our names, or named entities. What comes first, the chicken or the egg? Are we all named? John is one of the most, common names through human existence. I forget the way that it's interpreted, according to the old mythology. But the point is, when I go into it, I feel like the asteroid belt, and there's like 2 million objects out there, they say, and most of them are not named. Most of them, I think there's only like 25,000 that are named. And that's named by the International Astronomical Union. Now, it supposedly says international, which means all countries, you would think. But Western astrology looks at it and says there's 25,000 names. And every time you look at those names of the asteroids in your charts, it's like, oh, wow. There's a representation for almost everybody in my family, and it almost feels like it's representative of the energy that's there. Well, are there also names that are represented in Chinese language and Russian language and all the other languages? And when I've gone down through there, I don't see that. So does that mean there's another system in those cultures, that have that? And I don't know the answer to that question. That's another thing I'm looking at too. But to me, the asteroid belt represents the fragmentation of the human condition. And if you look at the expansion of humans as far as how many souls are here, it's like we all come in, we're having a human experience based on where we've been, and this is lifetimes and stuff. I mean, again, I've told y'all, Judith took me into some of the darker parts of what she felt was in my own existence in the bones. And I got these images, and she didn't even leave me into this. I mean, I saw myself on a shore off of Atlantis going down, blaming God because we went down. But we were the ones that moved away from God. We went into the unnatural creation. We're the ones that, through our conscious free will choice, went against all of the cosmic and natural laws, and we thought we knew best, and we created the cataclysm, but we couldn't take that on. And so there's so many. I can't even begin to take you into the vast number and levels and layers of the distortion that we all took on, over all this time period. And that doesn't count the interbreeding that's happened with other, cosmic beings, whether it's Alpha Draconians, the Greys, any of the other races. And as that happened, the physicality of who we are certainly has shifted over time. The blood types have shifted. There's just been a lot happen with it. But I didn't mean to get on all that. It's already 10 o'clock. I guess we better go into meditation. Is there anything else that anybody had questions with or need clarification on anything? Okay. Well, if not, I'm going to go back into silent mode, and we'll go in and do some good transcendental work. And again, when we go into this meditation tonight, I think we've been doing this more and more powerfully each time. I think we're really shifting the very core of our DNA, and I think we are able to let things go. And Galamy, you certainly can just, go in with an intent, whatever it was that that brought you that question. Literally see yourself letting it float away. I mean, this is for every one of us. I mean, this is the time to release anything else we're carrying that we no longer need. Okay, so I've muted again. Yes, but I mean, literally anything that doesn't serve you. I mean, just imagine Saint Germain and the Violet Flame literally transmuting whatever it is, because it doesn't exist. None of it ever did exist. I mean, every time we carry something, I mean, we think it exists, but it does not. I got to move from my chair to my couch. The other thing that's been really challenging, I think, with all of this energy with the polar vortex or whatever the heck it is we've been having to deal with. It's really, I think, had an effect on the body, the physical body. I think it's been a very transformative time. I think it's one of these things where it's like, how do you, how can you exist with all these frequential changes? And part of it is, the fact, like, you've got people like, where's my thing with this? Stefan Burns, who has been talking a lot with Pam Gregory. He makes a lot of videos. I mean, he's got like 500,000 views, if not more, 1 million on some of his things. But he's been talking about the 3-eye atlas and the cosmic interstellar, visitors and things for quite a while. He's an astrophysicist, if you haven't heard of his stuff. But I mean, he really, I think, has been articulating some very interesting things. But imagine that all that's coming in, and they also talk about quite a bit all of the solar flares. You've got all this plasma coming off the sun. There's these things that the scientists are articulating that are changing. It's changing the solar system. It's changing our atmosphere. It's hitting us. I mean, it's hitting our presence. It's hitting what makes us up, and it's a really challenging dynamic right now as far as what's happening energetically. So I think it's changing our body chemistry. But I think it's happening again on the subatomic and the atomic levels, molecular. But it's happening, I feel, as presence. I think it's changing the way we perceive reality, and I think it changes the way that our mind engages the external world. But it's also doing it through heart coherence. And again, everything's a frequency, and I think that those are the things that are really affecting the change, the frequency changes. So, okay. On that note, let's go ahead and, if you're not in your still place, get in and go in. And I'm so grateful we've had such a big group tonight. We're down to 16. A couple people probably had to drop off to go to bed earlier if they're in a different location. Okay, so just imagine anything that you have that you want to let go of and release. Just do that. Whatever it is, just throw it in the cosmic fire and let it be burned off. Yeah, just cultivate stillness and cultivate pure awareness for yourself. And let cosmic energy just take over. And go deep dive. Okay, everyone, I'm good. I'll leave it open and y'all can stay on as long as you want to. I'm going to go ahead. Thank y'all for coming on. So we'll do the next class of it, or the next call in 2 weeks on the 17th. That'll be the first eclipse. So hope y'all keep riding the waves. Much love and eternal blessings.